The Shep Naz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shep Naz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And we are continuing a conversation today on Pastor Rob's message from this past Sunday. We're back in our Shaped for Greatness series. And in previous weeks, we've been talking about spiritual gifts. And if you didn't know, this is an acronym for SHAPE, and H is for heart, which also we're talking about passions. Yesterday, we kind of talked about kind of our definition that we're working with for heart and passion. And today, we're going to take a look at the indicators that you could kind of use to evaluate what your passions are. So Welcome in, Pastor Rob.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to be here. Before we jump into those indicators, I thought if you didn't have a chance to listen to yesterday, maybe to give you an idea what passion is, the definition that we're using is that passion is the God-given desire that compels us to make a spiritual difference in a particular area of ministry or life where God is glorified and people are edified. So that's a mouthful, I know, but the idea is that God gives us those passions. He does a work in us, and then he does a work through us, and the work that he does through us is connected to the passion that he gives us. The passion that we receive is from him because it's something that's important to him in the world that he wants to be important to us. And then it compels us because we think it's important to make a difference in that particular area. And when it all happens, God is glorified and people are edified. And so that's important that we put that misnomer on there.
In context.
Yeah, right.
Well, yesterday, for yesterday's episode, when we were talking about that, there was one person that kept coming up in my mind, and that was Greg Bixler. And I was thinking
thought about him actually as well.
I was thinking about how, the Lord has gifted him. I have no idea what his particular spiritual gifts are, but I would imagine there's some craftsmanship in there and some administration and things like that.
Yep.
But then I can also see how God took a passion that he had for the needy people, specifically in Africa, and their inability to have fresh water. And so then he took that passion, and ultimately, he's been able to minister to probably thousands and thousands of people as a result of that.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with who he is, he runs a ministry called Design Outreach, and they've created a well or a system that can get water from deep in the ground, like a well. It is a well, but it's like
it's a pump.
Yeah. It doesn't go bad. It's just like one of the best ones out there. And you put a well in the middle of a community that was walking 3 miles to get water out of a mud puddle. It changes everything. And like you're saying, that passion that God gave him, working with his gifts. The other thing we should say is our passions, our spiritual gift tells us what we do, and our passions tell us where we do it. So that's kind of that's a great example. I thought about that him the other day when I was thinking about this.
So we're taking a look now at helping us navigate, figuring out, what are some of our God-given passions. And so you had some indicators for that.
Yeah, chances are, if you're passionate about something, you probably don't need 6 indicators.
You already know.
to know, right? But if you're still kind of like, well, I'd kind of like to, this maybe is something that can confirm it or maybe give you some direction. But 6 questions, and I'm going to throw in a bonus. Number 1 is, if you were to jump out of bed in the morning with enthusiasm and anticipation to go do something, what would you be doing, right? So the idea behind this is if you're working in your area of passion, you're excited about doing it. It's not a drag. It's not a bore. You're like, what is it that you would get up in the morning to do, and you'd be excited to go do it. There are lots of times you get up in the morning, you're like, I got to go do something, and you don't want to do it.
Sure.
Right? If you're working in your area of passion, you want to do this. It's not a drag at all. Second question is, when you're dreaming or imagining the future, where does your heart take you, and what images do you see in the future? So for an example for this, one of the things that I would share is that as I served as a youth pastor for 25 years, and I took kids to camp a lot, mission trips and stuff. And camps were really, really valuable times for me as a youth pastor, because I had access to the student's life for 36, 48 hours, something like that. And as a youth pastor, I would get to see kids 1 hour a week. And so if I saw them 1 hour a week for 52 weeks out of the year, I get 52 hours with them, all broken up. But if I could take them to camp, I could have them for 48 hours in a row.
Yeah,
This
almost
is
a whole year's worth.
Yeah, this is basically what Jesus did with his disciples for 3 years. They lived together for 3 years. This is how he had such a massive impact on them. So for me, camps are really like, they're an incredible ministry opportunity. So I got asked to help develop the campground down in Logan. And you asked me when I dream or imagine about the future, I see a camp down there in Logan that does not exist yet.
Right.
And it's like, that's where my heart takes me. That's what I see in the future. And I keep thinking of all these things that we can add or whatever. All we need is $20 million and it will become a reality.
That's it.
But when you're passionate about something, you can look into the future. You just imagine it. It's there. Like you see it. It's there in your head, but it's just not there in reality. And so your passion is like, my passion is to work to make that thing I see in my head become a reality for real, in real life.
Yeah, I had just a similar kind of experience with that recently. Before we were getting some extra issues taken care of up at Johnstown, I was working on some stuff there, and Mima met me out in the driveway at one point, and she just kind of dropped her guard for a second and said, "So do you think this is all going to happen?" And I was like, Yes, I see it done. I mean, like in my head, I see it done, and like there's no plan B. This is going to happen.
Yep.
And when you have that, I can't manufacture that. I either have it or I don't.
Yeah.
And because it's God given.
Yeah.
And in that instance, it's just like there was no doubt in my mind. I know exactly where this is headed.
Yeah. Yep.
May 12th is Mother's Day, and you will have an opportunity for child dedication that day. Child dedication gives families a chance to commit to raising their child in the Christian faith. Let us know if you're interested. There will also be an opportunity to take a photo in the lobby for your favorite lady that day, your mom. So bring your mom to church that day.
Well, that's one of the things that helps determine your passion. And for you, one of your gifts is to make those kinds of things happen. I mean, you can take something that doesn't work, something that's not existent or whatever. You can put all the parts and pieces together, and all of a sudden it's happening. I mean, if you want to see evidence of that, walk into the sanctuary at our church or into the Central Complex, and you can see all of that stuff, right? So that's there. So yeah. So question 3 is, what have been 3 or 4 of your greatest and most enjoyable achievements in your life so far? And the idea behind this question is, if you make a list of 3 or 4 of the greatest achievements in your life, you might look at it and see there are some themes that begin to surface. Mm-hmm. And maybe they involve your family. Maybe they involve building something. Maybe they involve helping or serving someone or whatever it might be. So whatever, as you're thinking about these things you would say, man, I'm proud that I've been a part of that, or that I helped to accomplish something, and you begin to see a theme, then you might be able to say, well, maybe my passions lie in those areas.
Sure.
So that's another question. Question number 4 is, when you are moving in the direction of your passion, time easily slips away. Mm-hmm. Our passion makes us less aware of what is going on around us because we are so focused on what we care about most. And the question is, what are you doing when this happens, right? So for me, it's fishing, but there's other things as well. But when you're working in your area of passion, it's like this. It's not hard. It's enjoyable, and you're so focused on it that you lose track of time. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize what time it was, or that kind of stuff. When you're not working in your area of passion, the clock never moves.
Yeah.
Right? It's slow. A minute seems like an hour. When you're working in your area of passion, an hour seems like a minute. And so if you can identify those areas, those places or times in your life when time really seems to go fast, this might help you to identify a passion as well. Another one, number 5, is that it says your passion will energize you. Working in your area of passion doesn't wear you down. It makes you more alive and energetic. So when your area of passion might be really, really hard work. It might be hard work, but when you do it, it energizes you. It doesn't wear you out, And if you're working in an area that you're not passionate about, it drains you. It just saps every good thing out of you, and it just slows you down. And it's like, oh, I don't even want to do this. I don't want to be here. Why am I? It's just it's
sure.
It's that. So So the question then is, what are you doing when, what is it that energizes you? What gives you that passion? And then number 6, if you could try anything for God and know that you wouldn't fail, what would you do for others? So it's not about what would you do for yourself, but if you could do anything for God, you knew you wouldn't fail, what would you do for others? And the thought behind this is that if God has given you a passion, you're probably going to want to do something in that area of passion. And the good news is that if God is asking you to do it, you're probably not going to fail. Doesn't mean it's not going to be easy, or it's going to be easy. It could be very difficult still. But what would you do for others? And so if you could, that's a huge question. That question has haunted me before. I used to run a concert of prayer. And the final question in the concert of prayer was, if you could pray anything and you knew God would answer your prayer to 100% of full extent, what would you pray? And I'm like, well, that's a heavy question and a hard thing to think about. But that's when you come up with the answer to that, it probably is connected to something that you're passionate about. So that's a good question. And
all right, so we got through the 6 indicators, and now we're moving on to the bonus round.
Yeah,
now.
bonus question. All right, so I am I'm 57 years old right now, and I've 67, somewhere in that neighborhood is the retirement age. Somebody asked me the other day, where am I going to live when I retire? And I said, probably wherever I'm working, because I don't anticipate that happening.
Right.
But I have 10 years, good years left, maybe, of hardworking, whatever. And so the question is, at the end of my life, I'd like to be able to look back and know that I did something about, you fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you get to the end and you sit down and you look back, what is it that you want to see that's there because you did something for the kingdom of God, because you allowed God to use you to make a difference? And I think, well, what is that? What is that thing for me? And what is that thing for you? And the answer to that question is most definitely going to involve something to do with your passions. And I'm not just talking about, well, I want my family to be well and all that kind of stuff. I'm like let's just say that's a given, that your family is all well and taken care of. How do you want the world to be different because you are here? When it's all said and done, you look back like, this is his legacy or her legacy.
I think I have a little bit more morbid version of it, but I mean, in my life, I've been to a lot of funerals. I know you have too.
Yeah.
And there always seems to be like a thing or whatever that the friends and family will identify of like that about that person.
Yeah.
And so there have been times, when I've been sitting through those services, because sometimes it's not always people that I'm necessarily close to. I'm just trying to be there to be supportive and help. But to think, okay, so if it was me up front, what would they be saying? Like what would capsulize my life? What would they say my life was about? Yeah. And but it kind of invokes some of those same thoughts of like. And I
think about that a lot at funerals too. And then you hear people talking about the other person. Wonder what they're going to say about me. I wonder if anybody's going to be here.
And it's like, am I doing the things right now that would prompt them to say the things that I would want them to say?
Yeah, because now's the time to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And I'll throw one more thing in there. Not another question, but I think that I think that you have the opportunity to make a difference and to be remembered for something great if you're still alive, no matter how old you are. Mm-hmm. Because I think about Moses. Moses didn't start leading the people into the promised land until he was 85 years old.
Yeah,
he was 85 years old. I mean, Noah didn't start building the ark until he was in his hundreds.
Yes.
I mean, of course, they lived a lot longer back then, but still,
he was still old.
Yeah, he was an old dude. And so if you're, this isn't just for 20-year-old people or 30-year-old people. This is for everybody. And I think, I have friends and people who have just retired or are retiring soon or are in retirement and have, you've worked hard all your life. You can do whatever you want with the rest of your time, but God has still given you a passion. And what is that passion? He's still giving you a gift. What is that gift? So what do you do, and where do you do what you do? Your passion answers that question. And so I think, people can accomplish some of their greatest things in the fourth quarter of their life or whatever, to give it a timetable. So yeah, one other thing before we wrap it up is for your passion to be correctly identified as God-given, because there's a lot of passions in the world. We talked about this. If it's going to be a God-given passion, there's two questions there's a test with two questions. First, does it glorify God, right? Mm-hmm. And does it build others up? And so if you are correctly identifying a passion that God has given to you, when you do what you do, it will glorify God and it will build other people up. If it doesn't do those things, it may be a passion, but it may not be a God-given passion.
Right.
And like I said, I think in the last episode, you can turn on the news tonight and you can see people who have passion that is not God-given passion. But we're talking about God-given passion. What is God given to us to do, and where does He want us to do it that will make a difference for the kingdom of God, and it will glorify Him and build others up. And so that's what our passion is all about.
Amen. All right, well, we'll leave it there for today. And what we'll end up doing is tomorrow, we're going to jump back into a couple of the spiritual gifts. And we're just continuing on in our series to be able to help you identify and understand all the different gifts, not only for yourself, but maybe for those around you as well. We encourage you to share this with your friends and family. And you can also drop us an email anytime you want to podcast@shepnaz.org. Check out the church website at shepnaz.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For Pastor Rob, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.